Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thanks to the organizers of the Doha Forum for setting up this panel today. As we survey the world around us, in particular, as we take a look at the landscape of international alliances, it's hard not to get lost in the maze of the acronyms that we see. As I look at it, we have APEF and IPEF, APEC and OPEC. We have the EU and the AU, the WTO, the WCO, and the WHO, and of course, OPEC plus. There's the G7, the G20, the G77. Sticking with numbers, we have the Visegrad 4, Five Eyes, and 2, as in I2U2. There are alliances with rather vivid names like BRICS and the Quad and AUKUS. And we have trilateral commissions. The US has several of them. And to top it all off, we even have an alliance of those who don't want to be in an alliance, the non-aligned movement. So the question is, how do we make sense of all of this? How do we get here? And what does this layering of alliances mean for our ability to take on important challenges? At the Wilson Center, it's an important issue for us. In fact, the coming issue of the Wilson Quarterly will be dedicated solely to that. In the lead-off essay, Baroness Cathy Ashton, who is a distinguished fellow at the Wilson Center and former EU High Representative for Foreign Policy, she describes the landscape as being split into two different models of collaboration. She calls them tankers and yachts. In her words, tankers are big and difficult to maneuver, but they survive at sea for long periods of time despite rough seas and turbulent winds. They can be slow, they can be unwieldy, not always agreeing what to do. Nevertheless, they do vital work, so very much of it unglamorous. Her tankers would include the UN, NATO, and the EU. And she writes that in the last 20 years, we have seen the rise of the yachts, fast in the water, and if the wind is good, able to maneuver quickly to respond to changing circumstances. But they're also prone to capsize. Yachts are coalitions of the willing, brought together to tackle one issue or with one purpose. With that in mind, let me turn to some of our guests who have experience in this regard. We have His Excellency Kanakovic, who is the Foreign Minister of Bosnia and Herzegovina, been so for about a year. He has an MA in sports management from the University of Sarajevo. He served in the Sarajevo Canton Assembly and was later elected to the Parliament of Bosnia and Herzegovina before becoming Foreign Minister. We have Australia's Assistant Foreign Minister, Tim Watts. He is the federal member for Gellibrand, and he was first elected to the House of Representatives in 2013. He's the author of two books, The Golden Country and Two Futures, Australia at a Critical Moment. Next, we have His Excellency Ville Skinnari, who's Finland's Minister for Development, Cooperation, and Foreign Trade. He has served as Member of Parliament since 2015 and been a member of the Finnish delegation to the Nordic Council. And then finally, we have Dr. Mabel Liu Mao, Secretary General of the Center for China and Globalization. The Center for China and Globalization is an NGO think tank and the only Chinese think tank granted special consultative status at the UN Economic and Social Council. So the question that I'd like to begin with is, given the fact that so many leaders didn't attend the UN General Assembly in September, we didn't have the Prime Minister of the UK, leader of France, leader of Russia, or the leader of China, are the days of tankers over? Over to you.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Doha Forum and Wilson Center for organizing this event and inviting me here. Distinguished Ambassador Green, thank you for moderating this event. We are small, I hope fast, yachta. They're trying not to hit the big tankers in the sea, And for us, it's really important. My country is, from some reason, I don't know why, so important in these geopolitical strategies centuries back. We had our own state centuries back, and then we were a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then first Ottoman Empire, and then Austro-Hungarian. Then we were a part of Yugoslavia, and then again we have our own state. So it's not easy, and these geopolitical movements are hitting our country, and we can feel all those winds almost every year. Uh, this is probably the fastest changing of the world in the history of humankind because of all these happenings, especially wars, uh, Russian-Ukrainian one and Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is something what actually is changing the world really fast, and of course we can witness that it is a right question: is this tanker time over, or it's even more important than now? I will tell you only a few sentences at the beginning. For us, it's the political priorities are easy to take, like decision to take. Our first top priority is EU integration, because of economy, especially. We have two approach. One is economy side. We are exporting 73% of our goods into European Union. Other 20% we are exporting into our neighborhood, actually the West Balkans countries, and only 6-7% are going, I don't know, to Russia, China, to Turkey, and some other countries. Uh, at the same time, there are parts of Bosnia, they have historical, traditional, religious relations with Russia, Turkey also. So those two priorities are mixing each other, but I think this one, the economy, is the most important one. So that's the top priority, and we are following what is happening on the first place in European Union. Maybe they granted the candidate status country to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Then they're conditionally opening negotiations with us probably in March. That is big achievement for us, and that guarantee actually the bright future for our country. On the same place, of course, we are following closely situation in Ukraine and then Russia, and especially this in Gaza, because I don't know if you remember, we had a war in 90s in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We suffered a genocide in UN protected zone. Actually, it was a failure of the world in my country. So I think that was one of the reasons why actually today evil is still alive, because world failed in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
So you are a member of tankers. A tanker let you down, and yet you're
Yeah,
seeking new membership with another tanker when it comes to NATO. You're a
excellent,
Partnership for Peace
excellent.
country already.
Excellent explanation. We also have some internal issues because of side of Republika Srpska inside of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is not today actually for full membership in NATO. We are cooperating with NATO, and I hope they will also change their mind. So we have internal problems in this small, fast yacht, and also we have these big issues with the big tankers, hope to be solved really soon.
Minister Watts, Australia is the classic case of a country which has been a member of many tankers indeed, but also in some ways one of the most striking yachts, AUKUS. Why AUKUS, and what does AUKUS mean for Australia?
Well, thanks, Mike. I mean, I think you've sort of got it there. Australia's really, we're joiners. We know that to get anything done on the international stage, we need to work with like-minded partners. We need to build coalitions of influence. When I think about the tankers, I think, yes, they are in some heavy weather at the moment. They're being buffeted, but we would miss them if they were gone. So when Australia looks at the world and the way that we want it to operate in the international system, we want a peaceful, prosperous, secure world, a world underpinned by agreed norms, rules, and international law. But really importantly, a world where countries can make their own decisions, where sovereignty is respected, where countries have their own agency, where no one country dominates and no country is dominated. Now, in that context, the tankers are really important. Australia played a very significant role in the founding of the United Nations at the San Francisco Conference, and Foreign Minister Evatt's major contribution, Australian Foreign Minister Evatt's major contribution at the San Francisco Conference was underpinning the role of small states in the UN system, the role of small states in the UN General Assembly, the voice and agency of small states. So we think that's still fundamentally important, but we do recognise that these tankers are under challenge at the moment. So when we engage in sort of mini-laterals like the Quad, when we deepen our existing bilateral alliances through things like AUKUS, what we are trying to do is make a contribution into supporting and buttressing the role of these tankers in the international system.
And the two yachts to which you referred, uh, part of the desirability is their ability to, while staying focused on a fairly narrow set of issues, move quickly.
Absolutely. You look at the genesis of the first iteration of the Quad, and that was a grouping of countries that came together in response to a very significant natural disaster. So we were able to mobilize quickly around a single issue, make a big contribution to our region. Today, the Quad is a grouping of countries, Australia, US, Japan, India, that share an outlook for an open, stable, prosperous Indo-Pacific, and want to leverage our own respective strengths to build a region like that wants to pool our resources and wants to work collectively together to build public goods in the Indo-Pacific, to give countries in the region options for pursuing their priorities in the region. So that gives us some flexibility and some nimbleness. So the things that the Quad has focused on to date, health security, rolling out vaccines in the COVID pandemic. It's focused on climate resilience. It's focused on infrastructure and connectivity, commitments to roll out desperately needed undersea cable connectivity in the Pacific Islands, for example. It's focused on building resilience through counterterrorism cooperation, through cybersecurity and critical technology cooperation. So able to identify risks to the open, stable, prosperous nature of the Indo-Pacific, and able to make investments in buttressing those areas of risk.
Thank you. Minister Skinari, your country recently joined one of those tankers. Can you talk a little bit about that? What were the motivations, and what do you see as the advantages that you gain through membership with NATO?
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. Of course, for Finland, the current geopolitical situation is very challenging. Having the geography, what we have, the history, and of course, the European Union is the most important platform as an entity. And let's be honest, all the entities are in crisis. We talk about UN, WTO. We have crises all over, and the superpowers, with all my respect, they are not that much respecting the entities anymore. So it's really challenging country like Finland, our long-term, long-lasting, multilateral, rule-based approach. The NATO membership for Finland and Sweden, I dare to say, is a natural step further. It's not against anybody, it's just to really convince ourselves that Finland is a security provider, not a consumer. And therefore, of course, having the world situation that we all pretty much in the same storm, but in different boats. But even in our parts of the world, we're not even in the same boat, to be honest, to be frank. And therefore, it's so important that we build up the dialogue with each and every one of you. Finland just completed our first ever Africa strategy. We are trying to do better in different parts of the world, like Australia. We're trying to really keep up the dialogue with China in order to be sustainable. But let's look at the UN. I don't know, but yesterday we could have spoken more about even the situation 10 years ago with SDGs. We all agreed in New York. Let's go further. Where are we now after COP meetings? So I think we should still distinguish the roadmap, if you like, when it comes to alliances. There are certain alliances which are there, but we just have to navigate, and that's where Finland is pretty good.
And Finland also has membership, Arctic Council, Nordic Council. Do you see those? How do you see those playing into your goals for greater integration within NATO?
Well, it complements a lot. Arctic Council, very important. Arctic affairs, although we're here in Doha, we just opened our embassy here, but we're an Arctic country, so it's very important to have US, Canada, China, Finland, even Japan. in the same table, and then the European Union's northern dimension, of course, completing that. But all in all, at the end of the day, of course, we have to be honest that we're in a world where the values, what we share, are facing certain narratives that we really have to look at. But for instance, climate work in the Arctic, like here, it's so important that, and I believe that we have a common goal and a common thinking. But like my colleague here said, it's so important that we still work on the integration, for instance, with the European Union and the work, for instance, what the Finnish president, the Nobel Prize winner Martti Ahtisaari did. He always said that all crises can be solved. It's just a matter of political will.
And Dr. Lumau, you've got the advantage of having heard what everyone else has said. But let me ask you this. Now, first off, obviously, China is a member of a number of yachts and a number of tankers. On the tanker side, the UN, IMF, WTO, G20, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but also launched essentially its own or most dominant part of a new yacht, BRICS. If you could talk to us a little bit about why the government felt the need to start BRICS and how does that fit into your relationships with some of the tankers that we've been talking about?
Thank you again for having me. I'm really glad to back to Doha again. I have been here for a few times. I think it's a fantastic platform to engage more voices, especially from the Global South. And thanks for the Woodrow Wilson Center's kind invitation. I visited your center for many times. I'm the fan of President Woodrow Wilson's spirit for the integration and the multilateral platform building. Also, your question is very interesting. Today, our global narrative full of the ideological and military network and alliances. Of course, the wars happening in the continents, but at the same time, the global south and the developing countries they are really enjoy to build up some networks layer and the mechanism for the economic development. So let's review a little about the current situation and the history. We know the Bretton Woods built up after the Second World War safeguard the peace continuity and the development economically. But this moment, there are so many conflict and the economic requirements. So I think the more and more, like you mentioned, the BRICS and other kind of mechanism rising, it's a strong response to the current situation and the geopolitical picture changed. But unilateral world is gone. Multilateral world is the reality. So how to navigate in the multipolar world? I think we should build up more mechanisms and the layers you mentioned, like BRICS. You know, when we mention about BRICS and the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, initiated by China, or the Shanghai Cooperation, those new rising platform, I think it's a kind of a response to the current ideologic or military ones, response to the too much pro the like-minded ones. And like BRICS, it's based on the economic interests. The cost, expansion very quick recently. Many people said, "Oh, how can it internally? It's many rivalries. How can they expand so quick?" I don't think G7 can expand so quick like BRICS. The reason, from my perspective, is that this kind of mechanism and layer, it depends on economic requirements. In the macro rest of the world, the global south, really need the economic narrative to support the multilateral system. This is my basic view. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. Now I'll toss out a question or two for any one or more of you to respond to, really picking up on what we just heard. So I think we all recognize the importance of the tankers like the United Nations, foundational nature of that. Is there a risk that by turning to some of the ad hoc or minilateral organizations that have been popping up in the last 20 years, is there a risk that it will hold us back from fixing the tankers and making them more nimble and making them stronger and able to take on global challenges? Who would like to take that one on?
I just visited Armenia for OSCE, which is based on a Helsinki spirit and principle in 1970s. But what I said there, I just repeated myself that if it didn't exist, we would have to build it up again. And I think the same with the United Nations. In this world, we need it more than ever, but we are struggling, as we all know. So I think you very much in the very core with your question that how we reshape, how we renew, how we restructure. But at the end of the day, it's there even when there is a will behind.
So you don't see the mini-laterals or the more ad hoc organizations taking away from the strength of the tankers?
Well, quite often we as politicians, if we cannot make up anything else, we just build up a new entity, right? With some new funding or without. So, but seriously, I think we should really work on the current structures and really try to find ways because it's the same in Europe with the European Union. We just have to carry on.
I also think they're still too strong. I don't think they're fast enough. It's not a question of a size anymore. In economy also they say that it's not like big fish are eating small anymore. No, the fastest one are eating all others. So now, regarding Bosnia and Herzegovina, we don't have any issues. We know our road is straight, like it's EU and NATO because of geographical position of my country. But also there is a sign in my hometown in Sarajevo, in the downtown. There is a sign actually which shows the connections between East and West. Actually the place where East meets West. We have economy strongly tied and connected with EU, like I already said. But like we broke all records in tourism this year, and many tourists are coming from this area, from this region, from GCC countries, from the East, from China also. So that can be also a kind of advantage without having any new challenges or changing like the main priorities. It is possible. I want to tell you, I want to say this, like now we have two questions. One is economy, of course, in the first place, but now it's even more important is the security. It's security. The Europeans, they have changed the approach regarding the enlargement. I remember Juncker's statement a few years back. He said it's over. No one can count on EU integration anymore. But unfortunately, after what happened in Ukraine, all of them, 27 states, they completely changed their approach regarding the enlargement because of security. Because now we are talking about 6 Western Balkans countries to become a part of EU because of security issues, not because of economy. Because if EU doesn't control this part of the world, someone else will control. They're afraid. They're actually counting on malign influence from some other countries. And it is now, unfortunately, because of Ukraine, a chance for my country to integrate.
Tim, to put you on the spot, the Australian point of view, we're talking a great deal here about Europe and Eurasia, but Australia is a country that is not only a vital member of the traditional alliances, but anchored to some of the new ones that are popping up.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I don't see the tankers and the yachts in competition in that way. I don't think they're substitutes for each other. As I say, we view our engagement in bilateral alliances, in minilateral groupings, in regional groupings, as buttressing and supporting that overarching infrastructure. So if you take something like climate change, right? So clearly the COP, the Paris Agreement framework is necessary. This is a problem we cannot solve without global buy-in. So there's no way around that. We need everyone bought in a global structure. But that is not the limit in the end to Australia's engagement with this issue. So at a bilateral level, for example, with the United States, we've recently added response to climate change as a pillar of our alliance with the United States, and driving in deep relationships and deep activities on supply chain resilience, on critical minerals investment and supply chains, to help us respond to climate change and deliver on those commitments that we have made under the COP and under the Paris Agreement. And if you look at the Quad, we are making investments in climate resilience in the Indo-Pacific. We're coordinating our efforts in regions like the Pacific Islands, where we are coordinating on the implementation of the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. So, the minilaterals and the bilaterals give us tools, they give us mechanisms of implementing commitments we have made at that macro level in the UN tanker.
Please.
Yes, the military network and alliances are very, very important for the world, but we should strike the delicate balance between development and the security. And I would like to echo with Professor Graham Allison said. Right now, they are full of the competition rather than cooperation. We should balance it much more. Like this is kind of response from the global south and the developing countries to the current geopolitical picture and the geoeconomic picture. The BRICS you mentioned, and right now many countries are busy in the CPTPP, which is upgraded network of the. We know WTO almost paralyzed as especially the dispute settlement kind of the reason everyone knows that. So the CPTPP is a higher level free agreement for the trade, and RCEP already implemented very well. It's cover large population and GDP production. So I think those are working efforts to the global economic system. It's kind of a new pattern and try to do something. We know at the beginning, maybe the kind of market people so-called the multilateralism. It's our ideal pattern. But at the very beginning, let's have the regional multilateralism like RCEP, CPTPP, maybe DIPA. That is a brand new issue-based mechanism. That is also can try together. I would like to call for more cooperation than competition. As we don't want to, we should avoid the Cold War mentality. If we leverage those blocks, the new layer, to divide the world into different blocks, especially the like-minded blocks. It's very dangerous for the world. It's easier to get back to the old days of Cold War. We don't want to repeat the history again. So for me, I think the multilayered world, we call for the regional, intra-regional cooperation to address the specific and pragmatic ways to address the common challenges, like we know the digitalization right now is a hot topic and AI regulation. All of those issues, we can set up kind of intra-regional or regional mechanism to support it. And we should build up the correlation of the consensus rather than the like-minded blocks.
Let me ask you this. We have, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, so many new multilaterals, ad hoc, if you will, organizations popping up. Is there a risk that if that trend continues, so that we have 20 and 30 and 40, is there a risk that important challenges will fall through the cracks? Challenges that are not necessarily covered by an individual minilateral. We had discussion on climate extremes. Is there a risk that the attention to the minilaterals, which is easier, they move more quickly, does that weaken our ability to utilize the global organizations and the more traditional ones?
Depends actually what is the idea, what is your goal, how our leaders are leading the stories. They can be advantage also, small multilaterals regarding some topics. Let's talk about migration now, so the whole world doesn't have the same problem. Migrations are the problem of the, I don't know, like the mostly Western Europe now at the moment. And we have small alliance, we are cooperating, working together with this issue, but I don't think that will actually ruin any big tanker regarding some other issues, I think today the world needs inspired and true leadership, less bureaucracy and more leadership regarding security in the first place, and then actually regarding economy. I don't think the competition, if in economy, of course, competition is okay. It's not bad thing, you know. I think it can improve all sides. But if you are trying to use these tools like to destroy other side, that can be a problem. What is actually what is the main goal from the other side?
You're not implying that the traditional organizations have any bureaucracy?
Yeah, yeah, especially European Union, I have to say, because that's what bothers me today. That's my biggest problem. You know, we need the leadership in EU. You can see the different approach in EU regarding some big issues, not probably not regarding Russia and Ukraine, but regarding Israeli and Palestinian conflict. You can see a different approach in EU. I don't want to talk about some other administrative issues I'm living every day because I will not. I don't want to use this opportunity. Let's stay focused on this main topic. So too much bureaucracy, of course.
Please.
Well, I think that if we foresee and envisage the future a little bit, the coming year, next year, what the world is facing, the fact that our economic growth is very, very slow and low. In my part of the world, in Europe, it's pretty much zero. So nobody is really paving the way for the global growth. So of course, our companies, our people, we do have to look for new alternatives, new markets, new kinds of bilateral, trilateral, whatever lateral agreements. I think Finland, Australia is a good example. So I think we as decision makers, we really have to think that how we work it out and how we navigate, as you said. And then we have to be open-minded, but we still have to keep up the rules-based thinking. And of course, it's challenging country like Finland, the technology rivalry between different countries, companies. I think apart from the security, I think that's the one. But then the climate solutions. I think my key message is that let's try to provide solutions and then get the financing along, because we have built up so many financing entities, development banks. And as a minister, I wasn't that happy with the scalability and pace of implementing. So I think the next year and year after, it's really that we implement these thoughts, although the world is in big trouble.
The United Nations and the other Bretton Woods system, the traditional ones, they should be strengthened and reformed. Everyone knows that they should be reformed, like you mentioned, maybe the bureaucratic or another style, this new old style. The multilateralism, the multipolar world is a multilateral reviewed and upgraded system to support it. So we are seeking a kind of platform, or a lot of multi-platform. So today's conclusion of the panel will be the shared futures. It's not future, it's futures. It means a lot of solutions we can seek together. So I was wondering, maybe we can open mind to seek more options. A lot of global south country told me that, oh, they are they know right now the leadership is eroded by UN, especially like United States used to be the strong leadership. The world need more public goods to offer for them to have more options and alternative to have for navigating the new world. So I think like the BRICS, like BRI, like AIIB, including the CPTPP, RCEP, all of those practices and initiatives, if they are in closer alignment with SDG 17 of UN, that is the common ground and the common interest of human being. Let's try. Let's work together. And I think the narrative itself for the world is very important. Yes, today we towards a multilayered world, but we should have the shared futures world. That's more important. The shared future, we need more cooperation rather than competition. Of course, like in the commercial world, competition produced more, kind of system and innovation. But in geopolitical picture, if we stress more competition than cooperation, what will happen? I don't think it will be the good result. The human being, we have the miserable history of the war, the Cold War mentality. We don't want to return back to the old days. We should strengthen more cooperation.
Let me offer perhaps a maybe an alternative question. Is one of the reasons why we're seeing these minilateral groupings emerge, is it in part due to the lack of the traditional trade agreements, that there was so much momentum on trade for a while, and now it seems like very few people are talking about trade? And so if you're not going to have true trade agreements in which each side gives and each side takes, and you have shared interest that way, are we instead going to see these narrower groupings pop up more frequently, particularly around supply chains, but not necessarily solely around supply chains? Is there any alignment there or tie between the two?
I mean, I think there's no doubt that agreements like CPTPP, RCEP, IPEF have sort of come out of that frustration with lack of progress through the traditional WTO mechanisms. As say, Australia's a joiner. We're a free trading nation, and we are enthusiastic participants in all of those spaces. But we still view the WTO as fundamentally important to global prosperity, and recent dispute processes that we have participated in the WTO have been important to us, and important to delivering outcomes for us. So, we are still big believers in that tanker, despite being active participants in the yachts. I do think, though, that if you look at a lot of the trade agreements that are coming now, they're not traditional trade agreements. They're pushing into things like digital services, beyond the border trade blockages. And so to deal with those sort of newly emerging issues, or climate-related trade issues, to deal with those newly emerging issues, you do need a bit more agility than we've seen from the tankers in the past.
I think we shouldn't undermine the importance of free trade agreements. As far as the European Union, we have more than 80 arrangements, if you like, and of course the most recent ones with different parts of the world are so important. But of course, I'm disappointed we couldn't fulfill Mercosur agreement. I really worked hard on that. The big question is that how we can build up our China relation, U.S. free trade agreements, very important. And then, of course, we are going deeper and deeper in these sustainability clauses and so forth, but they are important. But the most important thing is that we have the agreement, because then we have a dialogue. And that's what I said in South America many times, for instance, in Brazil. And of course, India, visited Delhi, and of course, this part of the world, the Gulf region, so important that we work on the FTAs. And I think the Australia FTA between the EU is a very good example.
I think WTO still will be the anchor of the global trade system, but we should reform it. By the way, I would like to mention another issue is that sometimes we build up the regional or intra-regional sub alliances to stimulate with each other. Like China initiated the Belt and Road Initiative, EU lead the Global Gateway, and the US lead the B3W, Build Back Better World. Those can reinforce each other. It's good for the world. They are they are complementary, and I think they can work together to cooperate for the better infrastructure. And the CPTPP, RCEP stimulate the trade picture and build up the kind of mutual beneficial trade system for the world. They reinforce each other. This is good for our global governance.
We've talked about how trade is
Example from Bosnia and Herzegovina, actually, and Western Balkans happening now. We signed the agreement named Berlin's process. Like that's because it's signed in Germany, helped by German authorities and some other countries. And it is a story about regional common market. 6 Western Balkans countries are creating regional common market, which actually should be advantage. It is aligned also with all our agreements, CEFTA and other agreements. We have European Union rules and everything. It doesn't affect European rules actually, but it creates a lot of possibilities, opportunities in economy. Bigger market is an opportunity. For my country, especially. We are second strongest economy in that region. So that doesn't affect European rules, doesn't affect CEFTA, doesn't affect anything. But we will have free trade options. We will have open borders. We don't have to wait anymore for our trucks and other transports. So that can be also a kind of advantage. And we need that before we are competing and fighting with the strong European economy. We have to survive somehow. They're too strong. There's a lot of examples showing like European Union, they have a structural and cohesion funds. They're helping yearly to their member states. Per capita, it's more than 4,000 euros per year. And they're also supporting candidate status countries with 120 euros per year. So we have to survive somehow. We have to increase our economy. We have to we have to create some new job opportunities because of brain drain. We also have a problem. And it can be a kind of advantage. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to affect actually these big trades among European Union and us.
We've been talking about economics as a driving force behind some of these organizations and some of the movement, but we can't ignore the fact that it's also about security, right? And that some of these organizations have emerged because um, parties to them feel a lack of security and stability, particularly in their neighborhood. Again, with Australia, AUKUS and the Quad come less out of economic concerns and more out of concerns about instability and potential threats in the region.
Yeah, I should be clear though that the Quad is a purely diplomatic grouping. It's not a security alliance. It's not a military grouping. And AUKUS is, essentially a military acquisition agreement. It's not doesn't have new alliance commitments. Um, but certainly AUKUS stems from the fact that in the Indo-Pacific we are seeing the biggest military buildup since the Second World War, the most challenging strategic circumstances since the Second World War, and we're seeing that build up happen in a context where we aren't seeing the emergence of mechanisms to constrain conflict, to avert conflict. So it's a challenging environment. I mean, the way that we think about the Indo-Pacific is that we want an Indo-Pacific that's peaceful, prosperous, secure, governed by agreed rules, norms, and international law, particularly the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. But really, essentially, a region where sovereignty is respected, where countries can make their own choices. Now, we don't think that that is something that can just happen as a natural order of affairs. We think that in order to develop the strategic equilibrium, the strategic balance necessary to preserve countries' ability to make their own decisions, that countries need to invest in their own capabilities, their own sources of sovereign strength. So that's what we're doing through AUKUS. That's what we're doing through our new defence strategic review. We are investing in the sources of Australian strength and sovereignty. We think that that's not just something that Australia should be doing. We think that that's something that all countries in the region should be doing, so long as that happens transparently and with appropriate strategic assurance at the same time.
In the case of Finland, Finland didn't just wake up one day and decide it was lonely and therefore needed to join NATO. Obviously, security concerns were a good part of that.
We've done our homework since 1940s, as far as resilience, as far as military, and as far as the unity of the country. And it's good. But of course, we have to understand the security plus economy and the social dimension as well, that how we really still invest into education, how we really look at the demographics, everything. It's a very comprehensive and holistic question. It's a question of public-private partnerships. But at the end of the day, of course, it's a question of sustainable growth. But for my country, of course, the most important thing is that we are unanimous when it comes to security. We have a common goal, and that's 100%. And of course, with our Nordic allies as well. But the economic question is very big now because, of course, we have to look at the growth figures at the global level. We have to look at our growth figures, debt figures, and that's why we also have to do big decisions when it comes to R&D and how we create new technologies, how we really compete with the big ones, as Finland, as companies like Nokia. We're working on it and we're working hard.
Bosnia-Herzegovina is in a neighborhood that has recent memories of challenges, instability, insecurity. So the moves that your government is making, obviously with some of that history in mind.
Of course, we cannot talk about economy, any trade agreements, or any other movements in economy without security. That's the first issue. It's not easy, but it can be really excellent example, especially today. My country can be excellent example. I'm representing my people, and I'm negotiating and making compromises every day with the people who are denying genocide, who are celebrating war criminals and crimes. And it's not an easy task. But the other option is conflict. So this is really good showcase to the rest of the world. It can be done. It's not easy. It's really hard. But the reason why we are succeeded is because we are brave, not because we have our mission. We are brave, and we want a bright future for my country. We suffered a genocide. We are sitting today with those who are denying a genocide. So it can be used for these situations in Palestine, especially in Gaza, but in Ukraine also. If you have brave leaders, then you can achieve your goals. If you go only through the bureaucracy or to some cheap political daily points, that creates only problems, you know. So it really it you need a lot of energy, a lot of you need braveness, but it is the only option for my country at the moment. And of course, I told you only a few sentences about brain drain. The other option, the people will leave my country. I think we're on the first place in losing a people, in terms of losing a people. They're going away. They're going to European Union. And they also, if we create job opportunities, bright future, they will get back to our country. So we need to put some efforts. We need to think about the future. We need to think about options and bright future, not about the past anymore. But it's not easy.
So, in the discussion that we've had, what we've heard is a recognition that some of the traditional multilateral organizations remain important, but that there are drivers, sometimes economic drivers, sometimes security drivers, that have led to the minilaterals and some of the newer organizations. And given the economic and security turbulence on the world stage these days, it's hard to see that pace slowing down. More likely to see, I think, new organizations emerging. I'd like to wrap up by reading the final part of Baroness Ashton's essay that she did on tankers and yachts. And she wrote, "We must cherish our tankers, and prospects of recreating them would be nil if allowed to rust. We must build more yachts, acknowledge that they're built for specific tasks and specific purposes, and strengthen their ability to perform such tasks. And most importantly, we must look for ways to combine the abilities of both to make sure we value the long-term commitments as much as the short-term action." Final comments from anyone as we wind down?
I think I already agreed. Like when I said it doesn't affect actually the big tankers if we have fast and secure yachts. It can be actually useful.
With that, maybe we can join each other on a yacht one of these days and enjoy the moment. Thanks, everyone.